Can I tell your story? You can do what you want. I won't be here. The Room Next Door is written and directed by acclaimed filmmaker Pedro, who's done a lot of films throughout his lengthy career. The most famous to U.S. audiences would probably be 2013's The Skin I Live In. And this was based on a novel by Sigrid Nunez and features the incredibly talented and incredibly captivating Julianne Moore as Ingrid, who's an author that put out a new book that's a little bit dark. We find out how dark it is with a few little bits of tidbitting a little bit later on. That was a redundant statement, but nevertheless, Ingrid is at a book signing and things are going well. She talks to one fan that wanted it signed for somebody in her life. And that ties a little bit into something that we find out about another character in just a little bit. I'm going to talk about that in the spoilers because it's kind of a spoiler. But then suddenly an old friend named Stella shows up and she says, "Hey, you remember your friend Martha? Martha Hunt. God, I'm so glad that Martha didn't have a husband named Mike. Wouldn't have laughed. I'm sorry. I'm trying here. But Martha is sick. And she says, you should go see her. Oh, absolutely go see her, Ingrid says. And then she meets, or basically reunites with an old friend of hers from when they were youthful and everything. And then they drifted apart. And Martha, by the way, is played by the incredibly talented and also ethereal possessing Tilda Swinton. And I love Tilda Swinton. You have Julianne Moore, Tilda Swinton in a film that could have a few laughs, potentially a lot of tears, and also some great dramatic acting. Sign me the fuck up, so that's why I decided to go after a shift and check this out. So then they share memories, they do some catching up, and then one particular curveball is thrown, and then we spend the rest of the film seeing, is this curveball, gonna actually end up getting hit out of the park? Is it gonna be turned away? What's gonna end up happening with these two friends that have reunited? So, a few things about this particular film. This apparently is Pedro's foray into, the English language, section, because it's not his first language, and that's all right, whatever. It's good to broaden your horizons. This has gotten some attention on film festival circuits last year and just recently got a wide release just recently, and that's why I decided to check it out at the local theater that's in my town. And because I love Julianne Moore in more ways than one, she's a great actress. She's also incredibly attractive in my personal opinion, but I just love her. And I thought, okay, cool. Her, Tilda Swinton, I'm there. Oh yes, and also John Turturro is in this in a supporting role. He's in there briefly, very briefly, shall we say. And really, it's just about Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton acting and doing what they do best. Unfortunately, their best isn't good enough, and I'm going to explain why. Look, while I fully recognize Pedro's abilities as a director, and I need to check out more of his filmography, hopefully more of it is available on streaming services, and I do need to revisit The Skin I Live In. I hate to say it, but while trying not to sound mean, you can tell when somebody tries to do a film in a language that doesn't really translate and play to their strengths and everything, and then the actors are having to pick up the pieces. And after the opening scene, it becomes very apparent, even though Julianne and Tilda are very, talented actresses, as I've said. A lot of these scenes feel disjointed, disconnected, like a bunch of body parts that, are put back together in, stupid ways and everything, where the legs on your goddamn head coming out the top of your head. And I don't know, the tits are on your hands and everything, so it's like this. So you're technically grabbing your own titties like this. What am I on about? I have no goddamn idea. The film is a mess. It has a point, but also doesn't end up saying anything despite saying a lot of things. And despite the fact that there's talent in front of the camera and talent behind the camera, I ended up feeling very, very disappointed by this whole goddamn thing, to the point it was actually actively annoying me. Annoying me to the point I was tempted to walk out of the goddamn theater, which I don't like to say. Because I wanted to see if it got better, and there were a few times where things would spark up, and I'm like, okay, and then it's gone. I was very disappointed by this, and I didn't like saying that, because while Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton, nobody bats 1,000, they've been in some projects that have not clicked with me. This didn't click with me at all, and by the time it got to the end, I was like, well, thank God it got to the damn end. It's in theaters if you want to check it out. I'm going to get into spoilers. It deals with its dark subject matter kind of in the worst way possible. It feels almost like it was wanting to dive into the subject, but then wanted to take a more, calm approach to it, but then also ended up just kind of taking a laborious approach to the point where it was almost dragging like a goddamn, disembodied snail across the goddamn, finish line. And Julian and Tilda have taken material that has not worked all that great and drug it like a corpse through the woods. I don't know what I'm on about. The whole point is this movie should have worked, and it didn't end up working. And I was left very, very empty by the end of it. When I should have been feeling something, I should have enjoyed what I was seeing, at least sunk my teeth into something. I didn't. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So, basically, Martha has cancer, cervical cancer, and she wants to, the treatment has not worked, and she wants to take her own life. She wants to do that, euthanasia, all that. And she couldn't get anybody else to be there with her. And she asked Ingrid, even though they haven't had the best, they haven't basically interacted for a while. The idea is she needs somebody there with her. Needs her in the room next door. They get like a cabin in the woods, which is actually a really nice, lavish thing. Really, really lavish, actually. Very old school. I thought it was the Hereditary dollhouse or, miniature house at first. But nevertheless, basically, there are memories shared. Martha talks about how, when she was growing up, she had a guy named Fred, and he came back from the Vietnam War all scarred up, mentally scarred and all that. And it wasn't working. Well, he came back from the war and it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. He came back from the goddamn war. Not good. And the idea here is that basically, he just felt out of place. He was going to go to he was going to, possibly move somewhere else, but they end up just having one kiss that starts out with a kiss. How it ended up like this? Basically, she ends up pregnant. He still wants to go to San Diego because he just wants to start a fresh life. She's left to raise her daughter, Michelle. We find out that Michelle apparently and her didn't have the best relationship. Ingrid also is with, kind of sort of with Damien, kind of, but not really. She's friends with Damien John Turturro, who apparently he's had interactions with both of them in the past. And, well, Martha in particular. And from there, we basically see these two interact. And there's a couple things like, okay, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. And if the door is open, I'm fine. If the door is closed, that's it. One point where there's a scare of some points where the door is closed and, Ingrid's freaking out. And then she's like, no, the room is drafty. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. But now you're prepared and everything. She's kind of a cruel friend because we don't fully get the explanation about why they ended up stopping talking to each other. And, oh yes, by the way, also, Martha was a war correspondent, and, we see interactions in goddamn Iraq. But she basically just wants to go. And I will say that Tilda Swinton does fabulously play characters like this that need to look like they're fading away. She's a very slight woman, I'm not knocking, but she can play that well. And Julianne Moore tries here, but the dialogue is so clunky and chunky and just bleh. It doesn't work. None of this feels coherent, despite an attempt at a level of coherency here. And eventually what ends up happening is, she's the day that Martha decides to do the deed, essentially Ingrid is talking to Damien. Damien has basically a lawyer in mind, just in case, because Martha basically says, I'm going to write a letter, to you, but write a letter also to the police, absolving you of all this. Don't worry. That ends up kind of not going well. There's a bit of an interrogation after she finds Martha, her body. She's all dressed up in a bright yellow suit and red lipstick and everything. She just goes to sleep. She takes a pill, goes to sleep. She was able to buy it on dark web, by the way. There's like one halfway okay scene where they're digging through they go back to her old loft apartment or whatever it is to look for the pill and everything, but then finds it in a letter that said goodbye. And because her health is fading and everything. And look, nobody wants to see their family, their friends, whatever, go through this shit. And that would be sad, but none of this feels... It's like it's taking place in a vacuum. I don't feel anything watching this. I'm actively irritated by how just clunky the dialogue sounds and how it sounds like Google Translate. But policeman's talking to her. That's actually the guy that played Attila in The Brutalist. The Brutalist is something you should check out if you're willing to sit down for 3.5 hours, by the way, with a 15-minute intermission halfway through. And, oh yes, they de-aged Tilda Swinton to play Michelle, play the daughter, so no wonder she looked like her. Esther McGregor also is in this as young Martha, which actually I thought she did a pretty good job there. I've seen her in a couple other things. And the idea is Julianne Moore is typing a letter. She is, typing a letter to Martha. Michelle has shown up. She tells her what Martha told, Ingrid, that she did love you, but she wasn't the best mother, and stuff about the father, all that stuff and everything. And enough of it could have worked, but it was so clunky and bleh that it just ended up falling flat. Anything that had an emotional punch just ended up landing with a soft thud at best. And that's it. That's The Room Next Door. It gets an F, I'm sorry. It gets an F. This did not click with me at all. That's all I gotta say. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. Easy for me to say. I think I butchered all those. But I'm John Ritland, and I'll see you soon.